What is up, ladies and gentlemen? So now, building upon our last video, we were talking about networking, and I had some comments and people were asking, how am I delivering power to my graphics cards? And you know what? I figured that's a great topic. Just bear with me because everything is running. So let me flip that light on. And some people were concerned about this right here. Yeah, that's just some plugs for my routers and this light right there. That's not permanent. I have a 120 volt PDU coming in that's gonna mount alongside this stud, so don't worry about that. But today we're talking about the graphics card. So if you'll see right here, that is a 240 volt L630P receptacle, and that's a L630P, or sorry, L630R is the receptacle, L630P is the plug. Those are the actual like technical names for them. So I have 30 amps of 240 volt right here with a line running to my box, and then this cord is plugged in to this trip light 30 amp 240 volt PDU. So from this PDU, there's these plugs, C13 to C14 plugs, that they go into those slots right there. So that's an empty one, and that's an empty one. And then you can plug your regular ATX power supplies and your server power supplies into that 240 volts. So I have this powering all these rigs over here on that 30 amp PDU, and then I have another 30 amp PDU right here powering all these rigs. And that one is actually, due to a little bit of poor planning, that box is actually out here. Not great, and I need to get a cover on that. OSHA, don't be looking at that. So anyway, that don't look at that, guys. Anyway, so I have two separate 30 amp 240 volt lines, and I have two separate 30 amp 240 volt PDUs. And then I run those cables to all the power supplies, and pretty much everything nowadays for computing is good to run on either 240 volt or 120 volt. Now, I don't take that for granted, and do your own homework. A lot of older power supplies will actually have a switch on the back of it. Let me see, I thought I had one over here. Hold on. Bear with me for a second, guys. Okay, here we go. So, nope, that one actually doesn't have one. So, super old power supply. I thought maybe it had a switch on it. Anyway, the switch will be on the back of an old power supply, and it'll be like a rocker switch, or it'll be like a sliding switch. Normally, actually, it won't be a rocker switch. It'll always be like a sliding switch where you had to use like some kind of little tool to slide it. And it'll say 120 volts or 240 volts. But if it's that old of a power supply, I probably wouldn't be trusting it with much more than maybe one graphics card and the motherboard regardless, because way back when we weren't powering like monster 300 plus watt GPUs and stuff like that. So let me jump over to the computer and show you. These PDUs are not available, but I did find some replacements that may interest you, and also explain kind of the numbers behind why it is safer to run on 240 volt over here in the US for guys that are not aware. If you're overseas, pretty much everything here is 120 volt. So us running 240 volt is a little bit abnormal. Yeah, so. Oh, also, for people that were wondering, I am putting the panels back on when I'm done working on stuff, and eventually plywood's coming down. I want to reskin this with plywood, but for now I'm just using the fiberboard. But these panels do go back on. I was just adding a bunch of graphics cards and working on them, and it's super easy just to pop the panels off, because people are like, why'd you build the cold closet if you're not actually going to use it? I am using it. That's what's up. So, all right, let's jump on the computer. All right, so we're over here on the computer, and let's go over a few things that make it worthwhile and safer in general to use 240 volt versus 120 volt. Obviously, a lot of you experienced guys out there already know this, so I apologize to roll back through it, but I do get this question a lot, especially from a lot of people stateside, because I guess overseas, like, everything's 240 volts, so y'all are just used to it. Now, let me click on over here, and before we talk about this PDU, let's just go over some real rough numbers. Obviously, we're going to try to be as exact as possible, but electricity does fluctuate. So say if you have a 240 volt line with a 30 amp plug. So you have 240 volts times 30 amps. That means that line could hold a maximum of 7,200 watts. It's never safe to push something 100%. So we're going to times that by 0.80, which is 80% or 0.8. And that gives us a theoretical safe 80% maximum of 5,760 watts on a 30 amp 240 volt line. Now, obviously, if you don't have full 240 volt, you got like 208 or 210 because that electricity does fluctuate, then your wattages may vary. That's why a lot of times whenever I say, on a 240 volt 30 amp line, you're good for 5,000 watts because it gives you that little bit of extra overhead to keep things nice and hunky-dory. So that's one plug to deliver 5,000 watts. That's a ton. Let's compare that to a similar plug that you find in most houses. So the most common thing here in the US is a 15 amp 120 volt plug. That's like, you'll find that in every single room of almost every house. And that gives you a theoretical 100% maximum of 1,800 watts. So we're going to times that by 0.8 to get our 80%. So to keep things safe and hunky-dory, you're going to want to keep that bad boy under 1,400 watts. So 5,000 watts versus 1,400 watts, big difference. You can run a lot more power through that 240 volt 30 amp line. Now, some people do have 20 amp 120 volt lines. So a 20 amp 120 volt line would be 2,400 watts. And we're going to times that by 0.8 for the 80%. So you're good for about 1,900 watts. That still does not even hold a candle to a 240 volt 30 amp line. It's like having a 60 amp 120 volt, for example. So you'd need 3 of these bad boys to, keep up with a 30 amp 240 volt line, and in theory. So that's just some of the math behind it. You can run more power through it. It's less resistance, less heat, safer in general. Now, some people do argue there's an efficiency difference, and there is. It's slight. I'd say until you're pulling a vast amount of power, you're never going to notice the difference. But some power supplies are more efficient at 240 volts. There's a lot of variables there that depend on different things and that kind of stuff. Now, do I recommend people switching over to 240 volt if they have the option to? Yes. Now, for a lot of people, they don't have the option. You just have to work inside your means. So if you're in like an apartment and you can't make any adjustments to anything, you can't change anything, I understand that. But you may be able to put like a splitter on your dryer, which your dryer typically is a 240 volt 30 amp plug. I am sorry about that. Let me mute my phone real quick. So a 30 amp 240 volt plug for your dryer, and I've seen a lot of people they'll split that dryer plug and use that to power a good couple 3,000-4,000 watts worth of rigs. And whenever they dry clothes, obviously this is not for like a family of 5 situation. This is maybe for like a single guy or something like that. They would just power the rigs down, dry the clothes for 30-45 minutes or so, or maybe even if you're a single guy and getting a little thrifty, hang those clothes up and get you a little drying rack in the kitchen and just say we ain't using the dryer no more. So that's one option that I have seen done in the past, and it's kind of funny, but you can get some power out of that dryer cord. So just food for thought there. Obviously not the best way to do it. And if you're married or have a girlfriend, they're gonna look at you like you're crazy. Now, let's actually, this is the PDU that I'm using in my setup. $295. I did not pay that. These things are not worth $295. The graphics card price hike and mining price hike has turned these PDUs into being super sought after and pretty valuable. I don't suggest paying this much for them. I paid under $100 a piece for both of mine. I am running into a situation where I do need another PDU, and I have been looking on eBay The biggest things you do want to check for, or you want to see what kind of plug it has. So this one is an L630P. So it's an L6 plug for 30 amps, and the P is for the plug. So that means if you were adding it to your house, you would need an L630R, which is the L6 socket with the 30 amp, and with the R means it's a receptacle. So just be very cognizant of that. If it's a 20 amp PDU, it could be a different plug. If it's a 30 amp PDU, it could be, it could be an L5. Typically, most of them are L6s. Maybe buying used in your local area may be a better option, or even used on eBay is cheaper. So here's an APC. It's a 30 amp, and it is, looks like the plug is they don't list it, of course. It looks like an L6. They put it down here in the description. I don't see it. So you would need to pull this part number up. Part number AP7541. You need to go on Google, find the company, and look up what plug comes on that bad boy. Because you definitely want to make sure you have the right socket in your house. This one looks like it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 C13s. Are those C13s? C13 to C14s. Yeah. So those are C13s. It also has some C19 plugs. I typically don't use those, but once you buy a PDU that has C13 plugs on it like this, your regular plugs are not going to work. You're going to need to buy C13 to C14 conversion plugs, and that's what these bad boys are. So this end right here would be the part that goes into the PDU, and this end is the part that goes into the regular power supply. And that's pretty much it. Get your footages right, that kind of thing. It is not cheap to be safe when you're supplying power to your graphics cards, unfortunately. We are graced on the power supply side of the world to be able to get, gold and platinum power supplies. But from my understanding, and if anybody comes across anything for some, reasonably priced PDUs that are a good value, please comment down below, let me know, and I'd love to buy one and do a review on it. I am not including any affiliate links for this $295 PDU. That one is no. Nobody better be paying $300 for a PDU, ladies and gentlemen. Not that PDU better have the daggone computer attached to it and be wiping your tail. So I guess that is another thing I could talk about. There are PDUs out there that have monitoring, and you can hook up Wi-Fi to them and all kinds of craziness. That is good to make sure you're not overdoing it, but there are other ways around that, and that's actually going to be another video coming up. So with that being said, I don't want to take up any more of your time. Thank you guys for watching. It's been fun, and it's been real, but I don't know if it's been real fun, so thank you. And if I did miss anything, please comment down below. And obviously there's tons of questions out there. I'm getting more and more questions on a daily basis. It seems like more and more people are actually starting into mining. I've noticed an uptick in the last couple days. There's been an uptick in payouts because we're making more money, and there's been an uptick in viewership, subscribers, and comments. So always nice to see new faces out there, and yeah, it's fun. It's definitely a lot of fun. So thank you guys. I'll see you on the next one. I gotta go clean the garage because this thing is a mess. I haven't spent no time in here. I've just kind of been in and out. So later, guys. Bye.